For over 4 centuries, the world has widely accepted a straightforward narrative that a grain merchant and a part time actor from a rural town of Stratford was the single greatest mind in the history of the English language. We are taught this as absolute fact, but when we apply basic historical scrutiny to this narrative, the traditional story begins to fracture, revealing one of literature's greatest mysteries. In almost every other historical discipline, rigorous scrutiny and debate are welcomed. Yet, when it comes to questioning the authorship of Shakespeare's works, it is often treated as academic heresy. Why? People question, why would you have doubts about Shakespeare's authorship in the first place? That's because the life of the man from Stratford presents a glaring disconnect with the unmatched literary mastery, worldly sophistication, and deeply aristocratic tone found throughout the plays and sonnets. Let's begin with education. To compose the Shakespearean canon requires elite scholarship, fluency in multiple languages, and a vast vocabulary. Yet, there is absolutely no record of William Shakespeare ever attending any school or campus. When we compare him to the contemporaries like Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson, their academic paths are thoroughly documented in the records of their campuses. The Stratford man's educational history, however, remains a complete and total blank page. Furthermore, the environment he grew up in simply does not match the staggering literary output. Documented historical records show that Shakespeare's parents signed official documents with a simple mark indicating illiteracy. Even more shockingly, his own children grew up unable to read or write. For an undisputed titan of literature to allow his own daughters to remain entirely illiterate defies all psychological and historical logic. Perhaps the most damning piece of historical evidence is his last will and testament. It is a highly detailed document meticulously accounting for mundane household items, famously including his second best bed. However, it never mentions a single book, a single manuscript, library shelves, or shares in the Globe Theatre. It forces us to ask an impossible question. Would the world's greatest writer truly die without owning or bequeathing a single piece of literature? When we look at the texts themselves, the author exhibits a flawless, casual fluency in Tudor law, high-level court politics, and aristocratic pastimes like falconry and royal tennis. The author uses complex property law as casual metaphors. This isn't knowledge that could be picked up eavesdropping in London taverns. It reflects the deeply ingrained lived experience of someone formally trained at an elite institution like Gray's Inn. The geographic knowledge is equally specific. 14 of the plays are set in Italy. In works like The Merchant of Venice and Othello, the author includes highly specific details about northern Italy, such as the inner workings of obscure canal laws, tidal patterns in Venice, and exact distances between cities, that were not available on any English maps of the era. This strongly suggests an author who personally traveled there. The Stratford man, however, never left England. So if the empirical evidence consistently rules out the merchant from Stratford, we must ask who remains, who actually possessed the education, the royal access, the legal training, and the travel experience necessary to write these masterpieces. We need a candidate whose actual life aligns with the literature. Enter Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford. He was a highly educated aristocratic insider legally trained at Gray's Inn, a champion joster, and a heavily documented traveler of northern Italy. When you place De Vere's biography next to Shakespearean canon, the parallels are stunning. From being captured by pirates to specific tennis court fights to a father in law who perfectly mirrors the character of Polonius in Hamlet, his life is the plays. Now you might ask, if he wrote them, why hide his identity? In the Elizabethan era, a strict social code known as the stigma of print forbade nobility from publishing poetry or commercial theater for the greater public. Doing so would have brought immense social disgrace. De Vere, a high ranking nobleman, needed a professional necessity, a pseudonym, and likely a commoner frontman to preserve his aristocratic standing while allowing his genius to reach the stage. Today, orthodox academia fiercely resists this alternative history, but we must look at the economics of the myth. Admitting that someone else wrote the plays would threaten a multi-million pound Stratford tourism economy and upend centuries of entrenched academic funding and institutional legacy. In many ways, the objective search for historical truth has been outbid by financial necessity and academic pride. In the end, attributing these profound masterpieces to a man with virtually no literary footprint does a disservice to the works themselves. By understanding the true author, the plays suddenly make sense. They become vibrant, deeply personal reflections of a real lived experience. It is time we look past the myths and embrace the evidence and give Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, his rightful place in literary history. Thank you.